Realme GT 2 Pro, the record-breaking 2022 flagship high-voltage sign. The fastest-growing smartphone company in history is not Apple or Samsung or Xiaomi as you might expect. It's a brand called Realme. I spent the last few days playing with their record-breaking 2022 flagship phones. And I think it's fine. We talk about them. This is the Realme GT 2 Pro. I gotta say, these guys do not have the clearest naming convent. There's a Realme 8 and X, 50 or C21. Doesn't sound very real to me. It doesn't make any sense, but what you need to know about the GT2 Pros, that it's the first time that this company has ever made a top-tier flagship. And it's the fastest Android in the world. By a mile underneath the phone, you also get a pretty decent quality TPE case, a 65 or fast charger, and a USB-C charging cable better than those flagships then. So this Realme company has been more than doubling in size every single year. How on earth do you do that? Here's what I think. I think that the market for affordable smartphones is held back by the market for high-end smartphones because most companies want customers to go and buy their flashy flagships. They have to purposefully make their lower-end phones less attractive, less good-looking, and also usually not as cheap as they would otherwise be. But RMI hasn't been burdened by that because they so far haven't made a flagship phone. They've not been trying to upsell people towards anything. And so with every single device, their only objective has been, how do we make this the most unique and valuable camera device possible? Some have had racing stripes, others, bold colors, quite a few have just had this massive dare to leap model plastered over them. It looks kind of like one of those drunken tattoos that you regret the next day. Not all of their designs are winners for sure, but they're consistently packed with really strong hardware for the money, and that doesn't change here. The Realme GT 2 Pro is less than the flagship price. I've been told around $700 to $750, but at the same time, they've managed to break 3 major world records with it. It has the largest internal cooling system. It has the widest ever ultra-wide camera, and it doesn't just use the same top-end Snapdragon 888 chipsets as every other current flagship. This is the first phone to ship with the next generation of that. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. But the very first thing you'll notice is not those things. It's the design. This is classic Realme. It borrows elements from other Oppo and OnePlus devices. 'Cause if you did, a Realme belongs to the same parent company, but it adds that wacky Gen Z flair that they're developing a bit of a reputation for. It's pretty tastefully done here. The flourishes of chrome dotted around the body, the ultra-fine texture on the power button, the contrast of matte and glossy on the back, the papery textured wallpapers, it's almost uncharacteristically classy. I would def have scrubbed this signature from the back to me. It just looks like they've written the word. No, but you only get that on the special edition variants, and oh, I've even mentioned the most interesting part of this, the material. So you know how smartphones are going through a bit of an eco-revolution right now with their recycled packaging and nothing included in the box? Well, this is Realme's way of doing it. The back of this phone is made of a biopolymer, which is derived in part from recycled paper and therefore uses 35% less CO2 to make. And on one hand, it is a bit strange. Like when you think of a flagship phone, you don't think of recycled bottle caps melted together with paper mache, but in execution, it just reminds me of leather. It's got that same plushness, but also that slightly cost texture for trippiness. And so when you combine this back, 'cause I am a fan of leather phones with this seriously alluring screen on the front, this to feel like one of the most complete hardware packages that money can buy. Like when you look at this form factor, it looks high-end. Yes, but it doesn't immediately strike you as one of those nothing-missing feature-crammed ultra phones. Right? Well, as far as the screen's concerned, kind of is every corner that I kind of assumed they would cut. They didn't. It's Super 8 for deep contrast, it supports true 10-bit color to be able to display even more of a range. It's Quad HD Plus resolution for more pixels than you'll ever need. 120 Hz refresh rate for fluidity with I think the highest ever recorded level of touch responsiveness, all top off with LTPO 2.0 technology, which allows a refresh rate to scale down to 1 Hz when it can get away with it to save up to 50% battery consumption. Plus also it's just a nice clean, flat screen with no weird jutting corners. I mean, I don't personally mind curved screens, but the point is you'll struggle to find something to complain about here. This is the internet, but okay. Let's address the elephant in the room. This is the first phone with next generation processing power. How fast is it? Kind of amazing, kind of underwhelming. Then hey, if you're enjoying this video, then a sub to the website would be real. The good, let's be very, this is powerful. This is the most powerful smartphone I've ever held or even looked at. If you want to put a number on it, while Samsung's S21 Ultra scores around 700,000 points on MTU, 2 benchmarks, this passes a million. I nearly fell out of my seat. I still remember the day where all I wanted in life was to get my phone to 10,000 points. And here I'm holding something that passes a million. I've been getting consistently higher Wi-Fi speeds than on my S21 Ultra wherever I'm testing from. And also it blitzes through games with seemingly less of a performance hit from sustained play sessions. And while the metal rim around the outside does get toasty doing so, the actual core CPU temperatures are at a healthy level throughout, but there is a counterpoint to us. And it's partly the fact that, well, I mean Android games and Android apps, they aren't getting more demanding, and last generation's chips had already run them well. But it's also partly the fact that this doesn't feel like the most polished optimized software experience. I get the impression that the only reason this is the first phone to have the next chip is just that Realme spent less time working with the chip. I've had a couple of cases where my widgets haven't been updating. I've noticed that the charging animation just kind of disappears when you swipe up, looks a bit UNFI, a few of the menus and core apps don't support the phone 120 Hz refresh rate. And so feel jittery as you move between them, and also something that cheapens the experience. You will find subtle adverts within the user interface. It's not a bad experience by any means. For the most part, this Real UI 3 based on Android 12 is quite an interactive, tactile experience. It's filled with settings that you never even thought to ask for. And it's baked in apps like Weather rather premium. I was slightly concerned that RMI was gonna continue its rather weak trend of 1 year of major software updates here. But for their flagship, they're committing to 3, which is fine. I would just refrain from thinking of this as some sort of formative experience. Just because they have the new chip doesn't mean they're squeezing every last bit of utility out of it. And that brings me onto the cameras. 'Cause the performance of phone cameras is more and more being governed by processing power. This Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 for example should technically enable next generation dynamic range in photos. But in actuality again, I assume because of a lack of time spent optimizing, this is pretty standard flagship performance. It does keep up with last year's top-end phones in most situations but falls behind a little when it comes to low light. Also doesn't have a zoom lens. However, this is a ridiculously fun camera to use. There are so many options. I don't even know where to start, and I love it. You've got your standard things like night mode, portrait mode, expert mode, etc., but also movie mode, which shoots in a cinematic ratio, street photography, which gives you more data like exactly how far away your subject is, dual view video, which records 2 separate streams at once, microscope mode, which uses this little third cap and the not 1 but 2 separate flash modules to get 40 times closer to subjects. Very cool, but also kind of irritating that there's only 2 megapixels ID mode, which turns a selfie into an actual usable passport photo, story mode, which highlights stars in the sky, 3D mode, which identifies faces and separates them from the background. And of course this 150-degree ultra-wide mode. It's a bit odd in that the normal ultra-wide camera on this phone is, well, I mean it's just normal. It's only when you go to more options and then specifically select 150 degrees that it gets crazy. But to be fair to them, even though it is kind of a hack. They've turned off distortion correction to achieve this wide angle when using it. It is genuinely astonishingly white. Okay. Just to round this phone off, it also has a 5000 mAh battery, Dolby out more stereo speakers, 8 to 12 gigs of fast RAM and 128 gigs to 1 TB to fast storage. But on the downside, no IP rating, no SD cards are bought, and also no headphones. So on balance, it's rather good. Like assuming that the price does end up at around $750 like they've told me, and assuming that follows through with their promised 3 years of updates, this is a plus. Okay. Bye. Thanks for watch this video. Please like, share and subscribe.